In the darkness of the city, there's a tunnel no one speaks about. It was once called the future, America's own hidden subway, built with pride, glowing with lights, carrying people through a secret path. But today, it sits in silence, the trains frozen in time, the doors sealed shut, as if the world simply turned away. Why was this subway abandoned? What secrets are locked inside these tunnels? And how did something built with so much hope fall into complete darkness? This is not just a story of a train, it is the story of a nation's dream and its quiet death. Welcome to Historia Unseen. My name is John, and I am the voiceover artist for this channel. The story begins in the years when America was rising fast, a time when every city wanted to shine with new technology, a time when the country wanted to prove that it could build bigger, faster, and smarter than the rest of the world. This was the birth of a nation that dreamed of the future. Factories were alive with machines, skyscrapers rose higher and higher, and people believed that technology could solve every problem. But deep inside this wave of progress, there was another idea growing, an idea to build something secret, something underground, something that would not just serve the people, but impress the entire world. The private subway was born out of this dream. It was not meant to be just another train. It was meant to be a symbol, a sign that America could control not only the land above, but also the world below. For the builders, this was not just transport, this was pride. Every light bulb, every piece of track, every train car was built to look modern, futuristic, almost theatrical. It was meant to shock the visitor, to make them believe they had entered the future. At first, the people who saw it were amazed. They walked down into the tunnels, and their eyes lit up. The ceilings glowed with hundreds of shining bulbs, the floors reflected like glass, and the trains stood there like machines from another world. It was not like the dark and dirty subway tunnels of New York or Boston. This was clean, polished, almost like a stage performance. And the people whispered among themselves, "This is the future of America." But the secret subway had a problem. It was not made for everyone. It was not designed to connect the working man with his job, or the family with their home. It was designed for something else, for business, for private movement, for the elite who wanted to travel fast and unseen. This difference would one day destroy the dream. But in the beginning, no one cared. They only saw the lights, the shine, the speed. And for a moment, it felt like the nation had stepped into tomorrow. Behind the scenes, the men who built it told themselves they were writing history. They said that one day, every city in America would have its own private subway, that these tunnels would spread like veins beneath the ground, that the country would live on two levels, one above and one below. But history is not kind to dreams that forget the people. And this story was already moving toward a darker chapter. The same lights that once amazed the crowds would one day go out. The same trains that carried visitors with pride would one day stand still in silence. Still, in those first years, no one could see the fall coming. All they saw was glory. And for a nation that was young, strong, and ambitious, this secret subway was more than just a ride. It was proof that America could shape the future with its own hands. But every bright light cast a shadow, and as the years went on, small cracks began to show. Maintenance costs rose higher than expected. The crowds grew smaller, and whispers of failure began to spread quietly in the dark corners of the city. Yet the builders kept smiling in public. They invited journalists, officials, and businessmen. They showed the shining tunnels, the glowing lights, the smooth ride. And they said, "This is the future of America's cities." For a while, people believed them. They wanted to believe. But beneath the surface, the truth was hiding. And soon, the dream that was born from pride would be buried by silence. The birth of the nation's secret subway was dazzling. But like every legend, it carried a hidden curse. A curse that would one day bring the trains to a stop and turn the lights of the tunnel into darkness forever. The story of the secret subway does not begin with its first ride. It begins in silence, in locked offices, in whispered meetings, in blueprints that were never meant for the public eye. Unlike the great subway projects of New York or Chicago, this one was not shouted in newspapers. It was not celebrated with speeches. It was built quietly, almost in secret, beneath the ground where few would ever see it being made. The men behind this project were not politicians. They were businessmen, mall owners, investors, Private developers who wanted to control more than just stores above the surface. They wanted to control the very way people moved through their world. The idea was bold. If shoppers could ride in private subway cars, fast and unseen, they would spend more time in the centers above. They would be impressed. They would feel special. And the builders believed this would bring more money, more fame, and more power to their hands. But to achieve this dream, they had to hide their work. They could not let the city question them too much. They could not allow endless debates, votes, or delays. So, the tunnels began to take shape under the ice, quietly, carefully, away from the noise of public attention. The workers who built it remembered the strange silence. They dug through concrete and rock while the world above walked past without a clue. At night, heavy machines shook the ground, but on the surface, it only felt like a faint rumble. Few asked questions, and those who did never got real answers. Inside the tunnels, steel beams rose like ribs of a giant underground beast. Cables stretched across ceilings, glowing bulbs lined up in rows, giving the space a strange futuristic glow even during construction. Every day, piece by piece, a hidden city was being born beneath the feet of the people. But the secrecy was not just about surprise. It was also about control. The men in charge wanted to own something no one else could claim. Not a public service, not a government project, but their own world under the city. And so, while America celebrated new highways, bridges, and skyscrapers, a different kind of monument was being built in the shadows. A monument not to freedom, but to ownership. Still, to the workers, the place felt magical. They would step into the half-built tunnels, wires hanging loose, trains yet unfinished, and they felt they were walking into the future. They told stories to their families, stories of glowing lights under the earth, of trains that would run silently without smoke, of glass floors that shined like mirrors. But outside those families, no one knew. For the rest of the city, the project did not exist, and that mystery only added to its power. By the time the tunnels were near completion, the secrecy gave way to whispers. People started hearing about a strange new subway under the shopping center. Some laughed, saying it was impossible. Others said it was true, that they had seen trucks carrying train parts in the night. The truth was even stranger. Yes, trains were being lowered into the ice, sleek, futuristic cars unlike the dirty subways people hated. Yes, lights were being tested in the tunnels, glowing like stars underground. And yes, the builders were close to opening their hidden creation to the world. But even in that final stage, shadows followed the project. Costs had grown, corners were cut, and safety checks were often ignored in the rush to finish. The workers noticed cracks in the walls, leaks in the ceiling, wires that sparked in the damp air. They whispered among themselves that maybe this future was not as strong as it looked. Still, the orders came from above. Keep working, keep building, the show must go on. And so, against the quiet warnings, the subway was completed. A secret brought into life by pride and ambition. A place built not for the people, but for profit. A tunnel wrapped in lights and glass, hiding the flaws that already crept in from below. The hidden construction was finished, and the city above finally learned the truth. There was, in fact, a subway under their feet. But it was not for them. It was for the select few who walked through the shining malls above. When the gates finally opened, the people gasped. And for a moment, the builders felt victorious. They had hidden a future underground, and now they could show it to the world. What no one could see, not the visitors, not even the men who built it, was that the seeds of failure were already buried in those walls. That the very secrecy which had given it power would one day be the reason for its silence. Because shadows can hide many things, but they can never hide the truth forever. The day the secret subway finally opened, it felt like magic. Crowds gathered in silence as the first train slid into the shining tunnel, its white body glowing under hundreds of bulbs above. The air smelled of new paint, new wires, fresh concrete. Everything was polished, everything was bright. People stepped inside and gasped. It did not feel like the subways they knew from New York or Boston. No dark walls, no rats, no smoke from old engines. This was clean, shining, almost futuristic. The floors reflected like mirrors. The seats looked soft and new. The trains moved smooth and quiet. Every ride felt like stepping into another world. The builders stood proudly, businessmen in suits smiling for the cameras, mall owners shaking hands with reporters. They told the world this was more than transport. This was the future. And for a while, everyone believed them. Families came just to ride the trains. Children pressed their faces against the glass, pointing at the glowing tunnels as the cars raced forward. Shoppers stepped off escalators, bought tickets, and marveled at the secret city below their feet. Some said it felt like being inside a science fiction movie. Others said it felt like America had truly entered the future. The golden years had begun. In the early days, the subway was alive with energy. Trains glided through the tunnels every few minutes, their lights reflecting off the polished walls. Music played softly in the background, echoing through the platforms. Visitors whispered to one another that they had never seen anything like it. Journalists wrote glowing articles. Headlines called it the subway of tomorrow, a hidden jewel beneath the city. Tourists came from across the state just to ride it. Even city officials, though not fully in control of it, praised its design as a model of what urban travel could look like. For the builders, these were the years of pride. They walked the tunnels like kings, giving tours to important guests, pointing out the shining lights, the quiet engines, the smooth platforms. Every corner felt like proof that they had been right. That secrecy, ambition, and money could create something greater than government projects ever had. And for a while, they were right. The subway gave life to the shopping centers above. Crowds poured in, impressed by the ride, spending money, spreading stories, telling friends about the hidden train under the city. It became more than transport. It became an attraction. The trains themselves were treated almost like characters. Sleek white bodies with dark windows, glowing headlights, smooth curves. Each one felt alive. Each one felt like a machine from another world, waiting patiently for passengers to board. For the people, it was thrilling to step down into the earth, into a place no one expected, and suddenly ride through a glowing tunnel beneath the city. It was not just about going from one point to another. It was about the experience. And so, the golden years rolled on. Day after day, the trains carried passengers with pride. Night after night, the lights kept shining, reflecting against glass and steel. The sound of smooth wheels on tracks echoed like music in the underground halls. But even in those bright days, shadows were there. The subway was never full. It carried crowds, yes, but not enough to pay for its expensive upkeep. The malls above thrived, but the tunnels below began to feel heavy with costs. The builders ignored the warning signs. They told themselves that success was measured in pride, not in numbers. That as long as people whispered about the subway, as long as it shined beneath the city, it would live forever. But the truth was hidden in plain sight. Cracks began to show in the tiles. Water dripped from the ceiling during storms. Some trains stalled for minutes at a time, their engines coughing in the silence. Visitors ignored these small details. They were blinded by the glow, the novelty, the thrill of riding a secret subway. But the workers knew. They saw the leaks, they patched the wires, they covered the cracks with paint, and they whispered to one another, "It cannot last forever." Still, in those years, the dream was alive. People kept coming, kept riding, kept believing. The golden glow was strong enough to hide the shadows for a time. And so, history remembers this as the shining era. The years when America's last private subway was not a ruin, but a marvel. When families smiled, children laughed, and trains raced smoothly through tunnels lit like stars. But behind every golden age, there's always a fall waiting. And this story was no different. Because the brighter the lights shine, the darker the shadows become. And soon, those shadows would grow too large to ignore. The golden lights still shined, the train still rolled, but under the surface, small cracks were starting to grow. At first, no one noticed. A flicker in the tunnel bulbs, a drip of water from the ceiling, a train that slowed a little too long at the platform. To the passengers, it was nothing. To the workers, it was a warning. The subway had been built fast, built in secret, built with corners cut, and now those choices were coming back like shadows creeping from the walls. The first signs came quietly. A broken light that stayed dark for weeks. A leak that stained the polished tiles. A train that shook when it should have glided. But the businessmen smiled for the cameras. They called these problems small details. They told reporters everything was under control. The truth was different. The system was bleeding money, and the cost to keep it alive grew heavier with every passing day. Still, the show had to go on. Crowds came expecting perfection, glowing tunnels, shiny trains, a smooth ride. So the workers painted over cracks, they tightened wires, patched leaks, polished the same spots again and again. The subway looked strong on the outside, but inside, it was breaking. The riders began to feel it too. Sometimes the lights dimmed as the train slid through the tunnel. Sometimes the doors refused to open right away. And sometimes, the silence felt heavier than before, as if the tunnels themselves were groaning beneath the weight of their secret. The children who once laughed began to look nervous. Parents whispered to each other that maybe the subway was not as safe as it looked. And rumors began to spread. Rumors of accidents hidden from the public. Rumors of trains stalling deep in the tunnel for long minutes. Rumors of workers saying the whole system was never built to last. The truth was painful. The subway had been built more as a showpiece than a true machine of the future. It was designed to impress, not to endure. And now, that design was failing. The costs piled up. Every broken wire, every water leak, every stalled train demanded repairs that drained money from the builders' pockets. The very secrecy that once protected the subway now worked against it, because there was no government to rescue it, no city to pay for its survival. It was private, and that meant it lived or died on its own. The golden years began to fade. Visitors still came, but fewer than before. Shoppers walked through the malls, but not all of them bought tickets for the ride below. And empty trains began to run, gleaming, but carrying no one. For the workers, the silence was the loudest warning of all. A subway without passengers was a ghost, and every empty seat felt like a shadow of the future to come. The builders tried to fight back. They held promotions, they ran advertisements, they whispered to the press that the subway was still strong. But the truth could not be hidden forever. The tunnels were aging faster than anyone expected. The leaks grew worse. Rust began to eat the steel in hidden corners. Some nights, the workers would walk the tracks and hear strange groans in the walls, as if the earth itself was pressing back against the tunnels. The passengers noticed too. What was once a magical ride began to feel eerie. The lights too bright, the silence too heavy, the tunnels too empty. What once felt like the future now felt like a mistake. The cracks were no longer small. They were everywhere, in the walls, in the trains, in the very idea of the subway itself. And deep down, everyone knew. The dream that had started with so much pride was falling apart. But the story was not only about broken lights and dripping water. It was about broken trust. The people who once believed in the hidden future began to lose faith. And when faith disappears, even the strongest machine becomes weak. The subway still ran. The lights still glowed. But behind the shine was fear. Fear that one day the doors would not open, that the lights would not turn back on, that the tunnels would not hold. The golden years were over, and the shadows had finally stepped into the light. The cracks had begun, and soon, those cracks would swallow everything. The day the lights went out, there were no speeches, no farewell rides, no final crowds to wave goodbye. The subway that once promised the future simply slipped into silence. At first, people thought it was temporary, a short closure, maybe repairs, maybe an upgrade. But weeks passed, then months, and the gates stayed locked. The train stood still, doors sealed, windows dark. The glowing tunnels where families once laughed now echoed with nothing but dripping water. Abandonment does not come all at once. It comes slowly, like a candle burning lower and lower, until one day, there's no flame left at all. For the workers, the silence was the hardest part. They had walked those tunnels every day, checked the wires, polished the floors, fixed the leaks. Now, their footsteps were gone, replaced only by dust and the faint sound of air moving through empty holes. The businessmen who had once stood proud in front of cameras vanished. No one wanted to admit failure. No one wanted their name tied to the death of the last private subway in America. And so, the story ended, quietly, without warning. The malls above remained open. Crowds still walked the streets. But beneath their feet, the tunnels were turning into a grave. The polished floors that once reflected glowing bulbs grew dull with date. The lights, once blazing, hung dark, some broken, some dangling by wires. The trains, once smooth and sleek, now sat frozen, their paint fading, their wheels stiff with rust. It was as if time itself had stopped underground. And with each year, the silence grew heavier, a silence so thick it felt alive, pressing on the walls, waiting in the shadows, holding the secrets of what had once been. Some said the tunnels were haunted, that at night you could hear the faint hum of a train that would never come. Others claimed they had seen lights flicker, doors shift, shadows move. Legends began to grow, because when a place dies in silence, the human mind fills that silence with stories. But the truth was simple. The subway had been abandoned because it could not survive. It was too expensive, too fragile, too secret for its own good. It was not built for people, it was built for pride, and pride cannot keep trains running forever. The workers who had once whispered warnings were gone. The tools were left behind, the machines covered in dust. And slowly, nature began to creep in. Water trickled through cracks, staining the walls. Mold spread across forgotten tiles. Rats made nests in the empty cars. The perfect machine of the future was rotting like any other forgotten thing. Above, the city moved on. Few remembered the subway that had once been called the future. Children grew up never knowing it existed, and for many, the tunnels became nothing more than rumor. Yet the silence below remained. Every rail, every chair, every flickering bulb still frozen in time, as if waiting, as if holding its breath. And this silence was louder than any crash or explosion could ever be, because it carried a message that dreams built in shadows never last in the light. The abandonment of the subway was not just the end of a machine. It was the end of an era, the end of a belief that private pride could outshine public need, the end of the hope that a secret tunnel could carry a nation into the future. Now, the tunnels were nothing but ruins. Locked gates, rusting rails, silent trains. A monument not to progress, but to failure. But there is something haunting about silence. It never feels final. It always feels like something could still move, still return. And so, the subway remains, waiting in the dark, waiting for footsteps that never come. A hidden grave beneath the city, carrying the ghost of a dream that once shined too bright. When a place is forgotten, it does not truly dissipate. It lingers in whispers, in rumors, in the imagination of those who wonder what lies beyond the locked gates. The secret subway was no different. Even after the lights went out, even after the train stood still for years, people could not stop talking about it. Some said they had seen shadows move in the tunnels. Some swore they heard the faint hum of an engine at night. Others claimed to see a single flickering bulb in the darkness, as if the subway was still alive, waiting. Legends began to spread. Urban explorers, young men and women hungry for mystery, started sneaking through abandoned doors and forgotten stairwells. They carried flashlights, cameras, and courage, and when they entered, the silence wrapped around them like a heavy blanket. The tunnels were colder than the streets above. Every step echoed louder than it should. Dust rose with every footfall, shining in the flashlight beams like falling stars. And then, the explorers would see them. The trains, still sitting in place. Their white paint now faded, their windows dark like blind eyes staring back. But they were still there, waiting. Some explorers touched the cold steel and swore they could feel a vibration, as if deep in the machine, something was still alive. Others said the seats felt too clean, as if someone had just been there moments before. The legends only grew stronger. Stories of locked doors that suddenly opened by themselves. Stories of unexplained footsteps following in the dark. Stories of voices whispering, even when no one else was inside. To the explorers, this was not just an abandoned subway. It was a time capsule, a frozen dream from another age. And the deeper they went, the more they felt the weight of history pressing against them. Historians, too, began to take interest. They dug through old blueprints, dusty records, forgotten news articles, and the more they uncovered, the stranger the story became. They found evidence of corners cut during construction, secret deals between businessmen, costs hidden from the public. The subway was not only a story of ambition, it was also a story of greed, pride, and secrets that the city never wanted exposed. This only fueled the legends more, because when facts and mysteries collide, myths are born. Some said the subway was cursed, that because it was built in shadows, it was doomed to die in shadows. Others believed the builders never wanted the public to truly know about it, and that even today, someone was trying to erase its memory. And then, there were those who believed the train still worked, that if you pressed the right button, turned the right switch, the subway would come back to life. That deep under the city, a forgotten engine still waits to roar again. The truth was hard to separate from the stories, because the tunnels were closed, the gates locked, and only a handful of explorers ever managed to get inside. Each of them told a different version, but all of them agreed on one thing. Once you step inside the hidden subway, you never forget it. The smell of dust and rust, the silence broken only by dripping water, the sight of trains standing in the dark like giant sleeping beasts. It leaves an image in the mind, an image that never fades. For the city above, life went on. People drove cars, rode buses, took other trains. But beneath their feet, the secret subway waited, and the legends grew like vines, twisting through every corner of the story. Today, when people hear about it, they ask the same questions. Why was it abandoned? What really happened underground? And could it ever come back? No one has the full answer, because part of the truth lies in facts, and part of it lies in the shadows. And perhaps that is why the legend of the hidden tunnel is so powerful. It is not just about trains and tunnels. It is about the mystery of what happens when pride is buried under silence. It is about the haunting thought that something still waits below. A secret, a whisper, a dream that refuses to die. And so the subway remains, not only as steel and stone, but as a legend, passed from one generation to another, told in whispers late at night, shared in stories of explorers and historians alike. The hidden tunnel is more than history now. It is myth. It is mystery. It is a reminder that what we build in shadows never truly disappears. The hidden subway still waits. Beneath the city, beyond the locked gates, the tunnels remain, silent, frozen, untouched for decades. The trains still stand where they once stopped, wheels stiff with rust, seats covered in dust, yet strangely whole, as if waiting for the doors to open once more. Time has not erased them, it has only sealed them in silence. For many, the subway is nothing more than a ghost story, a rumor of a forgotten ride, a secret whispered late at night. But for those who have seen it with their own eyes, the memory never fades. They describe a place where the air feels heavy, as if the walls themselves are holding their breath. A place where every drip of water echoes like a voice. A place where the silence is louder than any sound above. This is the legacy of the hidden tunnel. Not in maps, not in records, but in memory, in whispers, in the haunting sense that something was built here that should never have been forgotten. Historians call it a failure. They say it was doomed from the start, too costly, too secret, too fragile to last. And in one sense, they are right. The subway did not survive. It was abandoned, locked away, left to rot in the dark. But history is not always about success. Sometimes, it is about lessons, about the warnings left behind by the ruins of pride. The hidden subway is a lesson carved in steel and stone. A lesson about ambition that grew too fast. A lesson about dreams built without the people they were meant to save. A lesson about what happens when shadows hide the truth. Yet its legacy is not only failure, it is also fascination. Because even in silence, the subway still captures the imagination. It still draws explorers, writers, and dreamers. It still makes people ask questions that have no easy answers. What if it had succeeded? What if private subways had spread across America? Would cities look different today? Would we live on two levels, one above, one below? Or was this always the fate of a dream built in secrecy, to die in the dark? No one knows, and perhaps that is why the story endures. Because every ruin carries a mystery, and every mystery invites the imagination to fill the silence. Today, the hidden subway is more than abandoned trains and locked gates. It is a mirror held up to a nation, a reminder that progress is fragile, that pride has limits, and that the future can collapse as easily as a tunnel wall. But it is also a reminder of something else, that even when we bury our failures, they do not disappear. They remain, waiting beneath the surface, whispering to those who dare to listen. The final legacy of the hidden tunnel is not in what it was, but in what it makes us feel today. Curiosity, wonder, fear, and fascination. It is history, and it is myth. It is truth, and it is legend. It is the story of a nation's dream, and its silent grave. And maybe, just maybe, it is something more. Because as long as the trains still wait in the dark, as long as the tunnels remain sealed but not destroyed, there will always be the question, could it ever wake again? Could the lights flicker back to life? Could the trains move forward once more, carrying passengers through a forgotten future? No one can answer, and perhaps that is the greatest legacy of all. The hidden subway does not just belong to the past. It belongs to the imagination. It belongs to the people who wonder what else lies unseen beneath their feet. It belongs to the storytellers, to the explorers, to the dreamers who refuse to let silence be the end. And so, the story of America's lost private subway is not over. It continues every time someone whispers about the tunnels, every time someone dares to step inside, every time someone listens closely in the dark and thinks they hear the sound of wheels, ready to move again. The hidden tunnel remains, not alive, not dead, but somewhere in between, waiting, always waiting.